Dad's silent revenge.
I didn't react when my son pushed me down the basement stairs. I just lay there in the darkness, tasting blood, listening to his footsteps fade away upstairs. My daughter-in-law's voice echoed through the floorboards. "Maybe now hell finally get the message," she said. I was 62 years old. My hip screamed. My wrist was definitely broken, but I didn't call out. I didn't bang on the door. I just pulled out my phone with my good hand and made one call. 2 words. That's all I said. "It's time, Gene." Then I waited in the dark. You're probably wondering how I ended up here, lying at the bottom of my own basement stairs while my son and his wife laughed about it upstairs. Let me back up. My name is Harold Morrison. Everyone calls me Hal. For the last 8 years, I've been what you might call retired. I live in a modest house in Cleveland, spend my days reading, going to the gym, visiting my late wife's grave every Sunday. I'm the quiet old man at the corner table in the diner, the one who tips well and never causes trouble. But that wasn't always who I was. My son Stanley never knew what I really did for 28 years. His mother, my beloved Dorothy, she knew. She's the one who made me promise to take it easy when I retired from Cleveland PD, and I did. I walked away clean, took my pension, started fresh. For 8 years, I was just Hal Morrison, devoted husband and father. Dorothy died 3 years ago when I was 59. Cancer. It took her fast. Stanley grieved for maybe a month before his wife Sharon started talking about moving in with me. "You're all alone now, Dad," he said. "We can take care of you, and honestly, our apartment is too small now that Sharon's pregnant. I should have seen it then, but I was lonely. I missed Dorothy. I wanted family around. That was my first mistake. They moved in within 2 months after Dorothy's funeral. At first it was fine. I gave them the master bedroom, took the smaller room upstairs. Sharon was sweet at first, always asking if I needed anything. Stanley seemed happy to have his childhood home back. Then the baby came 9 months later. Little Tyler, 8 months old now, and everything changed. "Dad, can you keep it down? The baby's sleeping. Dad, we need to use your car today. Ours is acting up again. Dad, Sharon's mother is coming to stay for a few weeks. Would you mind sleeping in the basement?" Each request got bigger, each demand more entitled. And I went along with it because they were family. Because I didn't want to cause problems. Because I thought this was what being a grandfather meant. Making sacrifices. 6 months ago, when Tyler was just 2 months old, I noticed something odd. Mail coming to the house addressed to companies ID never heard of. Stanley being secretive with his laptop. Sharon suddenly wearing expensive jewelry. I'm old, but I'm not stupid. I started paying attention. That's when I found the documents in Stanley's desk drawer. See, Sharon had gone out shopping with baby Tyler. Stanley was at work, and I was alone in the house. The desk was right there in what used to be my study, and the drawer was slightly open inside. I found a quitclaim deed. My house signed over to something called Midwest Property Holdings LLC. My signature on the bottom, except I never signed it. I stood there holding that paper, and something cold settled in my chest. My son had forged my signature, my house. The house I'd bought with cash 40 years ago. The house where I'd raised him, where Dorothy had died. He was stealing it from me. I kept looking, found more documents. A reverse mortgage application, also forged. They'd borrowed against my house. $245,000. The lender wasn't a bank. The lender was a company called Premier Capital Solutions. I knew that type of operation. In my 28 years with Cleveland PD, I'd worked financial crimes for the last 15 years. Premier Capital was what we called a predatory lender. They target elderly homeowners, promise easy money, then take their houses when they can't pay. Stanley was either desperate or stupid, maybe both. I photographed everything with my phone, put it all back exactly as I'd found it, went downstairs and made dinner like nothing had happened. That night at the table, I watched them, really watched them. Stanley wouldn't meet my eyes. Sharon kept checking her phone, smiling at something. Baby Tyler sat in his high chair, babbling innocently, unaware of the rot surrounding him. "Dad," Stanley said, pushing his food around his plate. "Sharon and I have been talking. We think it might be time for you to consider assisted living." I took a bite of my meatloaf, chewed slowly. "Is that so?" "It's just that you're getting older," Sharon chimed in, her voice dripping with fake concern. We worry about you. What if you fall? What if something happens when we're not home? I appreciate your concern. There's a really nice facility in Akron, Stanley continued. We looked into it. They have activities, medical care, everything you'd need. How much does it cost? They exchanged a glance. Well, that's the thing, Dad. With the equity in the house we could easily afford, equity in my house. Our house technically, Sharon said, her mask slipping just a fraction. Stanley grew up here. It's his childhood home. I set down my fork. I see. That was 3 months ago. After that conversation, things escalated fast. They started treating me like an inconvenience in my own home. I wasn't allowed to have friends over. I had to ask permission to use the living room. Sharon complained about everything. The way I breathed too loud, the way I took too long in the bathroom, the way I existed in spaces she wanted. Stanley started staying out late, coming home drunk, getting aggressive. 2 weeks ago, he shoved me into a wall because I accidentally woke baby Tyler during his nap. Left a bruise on my shoulder the size of a grapefruit. When I winced from the pain the next morning, Sharon just rolled her eyes and said I was being dramatic. Last week, Sharon accidentally served me food she knew I was allergic to. Shellfish in the pasta sauce. I spent the night in the emergency room with my throat closing up. She apologized, said she forgot, but I saw the look in her eyes when the ambulance came. Disappointment that it wasn't worse. They wanted me gone. Not just out of the house, gone permanently. And that brings us to tonight. Dinner was tense. I'd made pot roast. Dorothy's recipe. It was Sunday, which meant it had been exactly 3 years since Shed passed. I'd gone to her grave that morning, like always. Told her I was sorry. Sorry, I'd let our son become this person I didn't recognize. This is overcooked, Sharon said, dropping her fork with a clatter. God, Hal, can't you do anything right? Shed stopped calling me Dad 2 months ago. I followed Dorothy's recipe, I said quietly. Well, Dorothy's dead, she snapped. Maybe it's time to accept that and move on. Something shifted in Stanley's face. Even he looked uncomfortable with that one. That was uncalled for, I said. You want to talk about uncalled for? Sharon stood up, baby Tyler starting to fuss in his high chair from her loud voice. You want to talk about how you sit around this house all day, contributing nothing, eating our food, using our utilities. Your house, your food. I kept my voice level. Interesting choice of words. What's that supposed to mean? Stanley's eyes narrowed. I could have kept quiet, should have maybe, but I was tired. Tired of being disrespected in my own home. Tired of watching my son become someone I didn't recognize. Tired of being treated like a burden when they were the ones stealing from me. It means I know about Midwest Property Holdings, I said. I know about the forged quitclaim deed. I know about the reverse mortgage. And I know who you borrowed that money from. The color drained from Stanley's face. Sharon recovered faster. You went through our things. My things in my house that you're trying to steal. Stanley stood up so fast his chair fell backward. Tyler started crying from the noise. You don't understand, Dad. We were going to tell you. We just needed to forge my signature. Needed to borrow 245,000 Trand from a predatory lender. What exactly did you need that money for, Stanley? Your gambling debts. Her shopping sprees. Sharon's face twisted with rage. You self-righteous old man. You sit there judging us. You have no idea what it costs to raise a child. What it costs to live. We needed that money, Stanley said, but his voice was weak, defeated. For what exactly? The jewelry Sharon's wearing. The new car you bought last month? What was worth stealing my house out from under me? It's not your house anymore? Stanley shouted over Tyler's crying. The deed is filed. It's done, and you can't prove the signature was forged. Who's going to believe some senile old man? That's when he lost it completely. That's when 35 years of being his father meant nothing. I was standing near the kitchen, close to the basement door. He came at me fast, both hands on my chest, and shoved hard. I went backward through the basement door, tumbled down all 13 steps, landed in a heap at the bottom. The pain was immediate and blinding. My hip, my wrist, my ribs, everything hurt. Above me, I heard Sharon's voice, cold and satisfied. Maybe now hell finally get the message. Is he dead? Stanley's voice, shaky now, like he was just realizing what he'd done. "Who cares?" Sharon said. "Help me get Tyler ready. We're going out for a while. What if he's really hurt? What if nothing?" He fell down the stairs. Accidents happen to old people all the time. I heard them moving around upstairs. Tyler's crying getting quieter as they took him to another room. Then footsteps, the sound of the garage door opening, a car starting. They were leaving me here. I lay there in the dark for a long moment, taking inventory. Hip possibly fractured, wrist definitely broken, ribs bruised, maybe cracked. I was bleeding from somewhere on my head, but I was conscious, and I was thinking clearly. 28 years of being a cop teaches you a few things: how to assess an injury, how to stay calm under pressure, how to think strategically even when you're hurt and angry, and most importantly, how to recognize when someone has crossed a line they can never come back from. Stanley had just crossed that line. I pulled out my phone with my good hand. The screen was cracked but still working. I scrolled through my contacts until I found a number I hadn't called in years. Gene Walsh, my old partner. The only person from my police days who would understand what needed to happen next. He answered on the first ring. "Hal Morrison. I thought you were enjoying retirement." "Not anymore," I said, my voice steady despite the pain. "It's time." Gene, a pause. I could almost hear him thinking, processing what I meant. "You sure that door doesn't open halfway once you walk through it?" "I'm sure. My son just pushed me down the basement stairs, left me here to die, and that's just the beginning of what they've done. Give me the details." So I did. Lying there in my own basement, bleeding and broken, I told Gene everything. The forged documents, the stolen house, the $245,000 and reverse mortgage from Premier Capital Solutions, Stanley's gambling debts that started this whole mess, Sharon's manipulation and escalation, the attempted poisoning, and finally, the push down the stairs. When I finished, Gene was quiet for a moment, then he laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Oh, Hal, your boy borrowed from Premier Capital. That's not just stupid, that's criminal. You know what this means?" "I know exactly what it means. I'll make some calls." "Sit tight, partner. Help is coming." I hung up and closed my eyes. The pain was bad, but I've had worse. Much worse. In my years with Cleveland PD, broken bones were part of the job. That's what Stanley never understood. His gentle father, the man who coached his little league team and attended every parent-teacher conference. That man was real, but he was only part of the picture. Before Stanley was born, I worked the streets. Robbery, assault, domestic violence calls that would keep you awake at night. Then I moved to financial crimes, where I learned that the worst criminals wear suits and steal millions with a pen instead of a gun. I worked cases that would give my son nightmares. I was a detective who never let the bad guys win, but when Dorothy got pregnant, she made me promise to find balance. She didn't want our child growing up with a father who saw the world as nothing but predators and victims, so I learned to separate work from home. I became both men, the hard cop who caught criminals, and the gentle father who read bedtime stories. For 28 years, I walked that line perfectly. Stanley never saw the dark side. He only knew the dad who helped with homework and taught him to throw a baseball. When I retired at 54 with a full pension, he thought I'd just been pushing papers for the city all those years. Nobody except Gene knew the real scope of what I'd done. Gene Walsh was my partner for 12 years, the only person from that life I trusted completely. When I retired, he left the force too and started his own private investigation firm, specializing in financial crimes. Wed stayed in touch, but loosely. Holiday cards, the occasional beer when we ran into each other. Now I was calling in 8 years of accumulated favor. I must have passed out from the pain because the next thing I knew, light was streaming through the basement window. Morning. My phone showed 6 missed calls from Stanley, probably realizing he might have actually killed me and worried about the legal complications. I tried to move and immediately regretted it. Everything hurt worse after lying on concrete all night. But I was alive, conscious, and thinking clearly. In financial crimes, we learned that the best investigations happen when the criminals think they've won, when they get sloppy, when they make mistakes. Stanley and Sharon were about to make a lot of mistakes. I heard the front door open upstairs. Footsteps. The basement door creaked open. "Dad," Stanley's voice, shaking. "Dad, Are you down there? I didn't answer. Let him sweat. Oh God, Sharon, call 911. Are you insane? Her voice hissed. If he tells them what happened, he fell. It was an accident. Nobody's going to believe that, you idiot. If they examine him and see the bruises from last week, so what do we do? Silence. Then Sharon's voice, cold and calculating. We wait. If he's not dead yet, he will be soon. Old people die from falls all the time. We just say we found him this morning when we got back from our drive. That's murder. That's survival. You want Premier Capital to find out we don't have their money? You want to tell them we spent it all on your gambling debts? This is the only way out. More silence. Then Stanley's footsteps retreating. The basement door closed with a click. They were going to let me die down here. My own son was going to let me die rather than face the consequences of what he'd done. I checked my phone. A text from Jean, wheels in motion. Linda Stevens from Financial Crimes on her way. Stay quiet. Play dead if they come down. Recording everything now. Linda Stevens. I remembered her, sharp detective, transferred to Financial Crimes about 5 years before I retired. If Jean had brought her in, this was about to become official very quickly. 6 hours later, I heard vehicles outside. Multiple cars, heavy footsteps, the front door being opened with authority, not a key. Cleveland police. Stanley Morrison, Sharon Morrison, step away from each other and put your hands where we can see them. What the hell? Stanley's voice, terrified. You can't just break into our house. We have a warrant. Stanley Morrison, you're under arrest for elder abuse, wire fraud, and forgery. Sharon Morrison, you're under arrest as an accomplice. I heard Sharon scream, heard baby Tyler start crying, heard chaos upstairs. Then footsteps thundered down the basement stairs. The light flicked on. 3 people stood over me. Gene Walsh, looking exactly the same except for some gray in his hair. Detective Linda Stevens from Financial Crimes, holding a badge, and a paramedic with a medical bag. Hal, Gene said, kneeling down. You look like hell. Feel worse. Did you get them? We got them, and a lot more, he gestured to Detective Stevens. Tell him. Linda crouched down, her voice professional but sympathetic. Your son and daughter-in-law weren't the only victims of Premier Capital Solutions. Mr. Morrison, we've been investigating them for 8 months as part of a federal task force. When Jean brought us your case last night, it gave us the missing piece we needed. What did you find? Evidence of systematic elder fraud. Stanley and Sharon weren't just victims, they were accomplices. They were recruiting elderly homeowners for Premier Capital in exchange for reduced payments on their own debt. Gene shook his head. Your boy was helping them steal from people like you, Hal. 8 other families in Cleveland alone. We found the recruitment files on Sharon's laptop, email chains, bank records showing their commissions. They've been running this scam for 6 months. The paramedics lifted me carefully, professionally. As they carried me up the stairs, I got a good look at the living room. Stanley and Sharon were in handcuffs, surrounded by police officers and FBI agents. Boxes of evidence were being carried out. Baby Tyler was with a social worker, crying but safe. Stanley couldn't look at me. Sharon shot me a look of pure hatred. You really going to let them do this? Stanley asked quietly as they led him past my stretcher. Do what? Hold you accountable for your choices. I'm your son. You pushed me down the stairs. You forged my signature. You stole from me and 8 other families. You were going to let me die. I leaned forward despite the pain. You stopped being my son when you chose this path. We needed the money. Everyone needs money. Not everyone becomes a thief and an attempted murderer. They took him away. Sharon followed, still cursing at me. Baby Tyler went with the social worker until other family could be located. Sharon's sister from Toledo, according to the paperwork I saw later. At the hospital, they x-rayed everything. Fractured hip, broken wrist, 3 cracked ribs, minor concussion. The doctor asked what happened. I fell down the stairs, I said. Someone should stay with you. Do you have family? No, I said. No family. They kept me for 4 days. Jean visited every day, bringing updates on the case. The FBI had seized Premier Capital Solutions offices. Stanley and Sharon's apartment had been searched, revealing boxes of documents, bank records, and communication with other elderly victims. The federal prosecutor is calling it one of the largest elder fraud rings they've seen in Ohio. Jean told me on day 3. Stanley and Sharon recruited 23 families across 3 counties, total damages over $2.8 million. What about baby Tyler? Sharon's sister took him. Clean background check, stable marriage, no criminal history. The kid will be fine. When I got home, Jean was waiting for me with Detective Stevens and a man I didn't recognize in an expensive suit. "Hal, this is Assistant District Attorney Arthur Peterson," Jean said. "He's prosecuting the case." Peterson shook my good hand carefully. "Mr. Morrison, I want you to know that your cooperation made this case. Without your evidence and willingness to testify, we never would have gotten the entire network." What's the timeline? Stanley pled guilty to elder abuse, wire fraud, and assault. 3 years federal prison, 5 years probation, full restitution to all victims. Sharon got 18 months for her cooperation in identifying other victims, but shall serve every day of it. And Premier Capital, shut down permanently. The owner got 8 years federal prison for racketeering. We seized $2.3 million in assets. Every family is getting their money back, plus damages. Linda Stevens handed me a folder. Your house deed has been corrected and filed. The reverse mortgage has been voided. Legally, it's like none of this ever happened, except it did happen. The bruises faded. My wrist healed, but the knowledge of what my son was capable of never would. 3 months later, I got a letter from Stanley in federal prison. He said he was sorry. He said Sharon had manipulated him. He said he wanted to make things right when he got out. I threw the letter away without finishing it. You see, some people think family means unconditional forgiveness. That blood should excuse any betrayal. Those people have never been pushed down the stairs by their own child. Those people have never had their life's work stolen by someone they raised and loved. I live alone now. My house is mine again. I have my routines, my quiet life. I visit Dorothy every Sunday and tell her about my week. But I have something else now too. The DA's office asked me to consult on elderly financial abuse cases. Turns out there's a lot of Stanley and Sharon types out there preying on people like me. People who worked their whole lives, saved their money, just want to enjoy their retirement in peace. Last month, I helped catch a grandson who was stealing his grandmother's Social Security checks. The month before, it was a daughter who was forging her father's signature on bank withdrawals. Each case reminds me that what happened to me wasn't unique. It was part of a pattern, a type of crime that targets the most vulnerable among us. I'm not fully retired anymore. I'm not the quiet old man at the corner table. I'm the guy who knows how these predators work, and I'm the guy who stops them. Jean and I work together now, his pie firm and my experience making a good team. Stanley gets out in 18 months. He's written me 12 letters total. I've thrown them all away. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. Some betrayals cut too deep for healing. But I sleep well at night, knowing that other families won't go through what I went through. And at my age, that's worth more than all the family reconciliation in the world. The best revenge isn't getting even. It's using your pain to protect others from the same fate. Stanley thought he was pushing a helpless old man down the stairs. Instead, he awakened someone who'd spent 28 years learning how to catch criminals like him. Sometimes I dream about Dorothy. She's sitting at our kitchen table, the one Stanley grew up eating at. She asks me if I did the right thing. I tell her about the other families we saved, the predators we caught, the elderly victims who got their money back and their dignity restored. She nods and says, "That's my Hal. Always protecting people." When I wake up, I know she approves, not of what Stanley became, but of what I chose to do about it. The house is quiet, but it's my quiet, now clean quiet, honest quiet, and that makes all the difference. Yesterday, Linda Stevens called with a new case, a 68-year-old widow in Lakewood whose nephew has been managing her finances. The bank flagged some suspicious transactions. Would I be willing to take a look? I told her I'd be there this afternoon because that's what I do now. I'm Harold Morrison, 62 years old, and I protect people from their own families when those families forget what love actually means. And am very good at my job. Sometimes the people who hurt us the most teach us the most valuable lessons, not about forgiveness, but about purpose. My son's betrayal didn't break me. It revealed who I was meant to become. They say blood is thicker than water, but I learned that integrity is thicker than both. When family becomes the enemy, protecting strangers becomes the highest form of love.